Welcome to the Code with Jason meetup. This evening, we're here with my new friend Yen. Yen, welcome to the meetup.
Hi, thank you.
And we're here with a fixture of the Code with Jason community, Guillaume. So welcome, Guillaume. Um, and Yen, this is our first of maybe many multiple meetings for my free mentorship program.
Yeah, I
And
hope
you were
so.
one of the first people to apply, Yen. And I'm just curious, first of all, how did you find out about it?
Um, it was from a Reddit post that you had
Hmm.
posted.
Okay.
I'm frequently on there just on like the Rails subreddit or just other coding related subreddits. And I saw that you'd posted that you were offering mentorship, and so I clicked on it. It was legit, seemed legit. You were a real person. I was like, I better take you up on this offer.
Yeah, and you had a very nice application. I remember that I read your application and I was like, this is a yes for sure. So nice job on that.
Thank
Um,
you.
Tell us a little bit about yourself and your background and maybe in addition to that, what you're hoping to do next with your career.
Right. So I am a stay-at-home mom of 8 years who is transitioning out of that and hopefully into the tech world of software engineering. I
Okay.
was
How
in the
old are your
military.
kids?
My oldest is 8, and then I have a 6, and my youngest is 2.
Oh wow. Okay.
Yeah. And so I got into computers at a young age. So it's always kind of been something that I've been interested in. But after graduating high school, I joined the army and I learned to speak Arabic there. And then I got out, got married. Well, I got married while I was in the army, had kids. And then once my husband and I both got out, went to school, and I've just kind of been at home with the kids while my husband worked. And so
Mm-hmm.
I figured it's you know, time to figure out what it is that
Yeah.
I like, figure out who I am as a person. And I stumbled upon web development, I guess, as I was looking at college courses. I was just like, what degree do I want to pursue? And I started taking some, and I was like, wow, this makes total sense. These are things that I loved to do as a teenager. Like, I don't know, back in the MySpace days or the blog days of Zanga, where you just edit the CSS and the HTML, the easy stuff. I really enjoyed those things. So I took some classes and I tried to pursue computer science, a computer science degree, but I have little kids. And so it was hard on and off. Um, and so I decided to just do a coding boot camp. And I started in October. And since then, it's been going. It's been real hard. It's been real busy. But I've learned that I actually truly do love coding. It's been a huge, huge joy for me. And I just love learning all that I can.
Good. Um, which coding boot camp did you go to?
I'm currently in Turing School of Software and Design.
Oh, okay. Um, yeah, okay. So let's see. You told us about yourself. Yeah, and you're wanting to go into a career of programming. Um, and obviously you're familiar with the Ruby community because you found my free membership advertisement on Reddit. Um, and are you interested specifically in getting a job using Ruby and Rails and all that? Or are you kind of open to whatever you might find?
You know what? I would love to continue working with Ruby and Rails just because I feel like um, going through these structured lessons, I guess I feel like I have a more in-depth knowledge of it. Whereas if I got a different job in something else, I would have to learn it on my own and maybe have less time to be as familiar with it and as comfortable with it. I would love to work with Rails. That's like the dream. But if I have to switch to something else, you know, I'm also open to that as well.
Yeah, okay. Okay. And you had maybe some questions for me?
Yeah. I currently in my mod, we call them mods, and we are doing a lot of testing. We just built actually we this mod we just learned how to use Rails with Ruby. The first mod we just worked with pure Ruby. And during our last group project, I learned a lot more in this group dynamic than I have in the past because everyone was writing their tests differently. And we were putting codes, our blocks of codes, like the before blocks, in different areas of our test spec. And I was just curious if that's a good practice, curious about what we could do better about that in general. Because I've heard of things like using let and the let with the exclamation mark. Um, just mostly and a better and quicker way, I guess, to write tests, if that makes sense, because I find that I put a lot of my time into writing the tests,
Hmm.
the test writing process, I suppose.
Okay. Um, I'll answer your question in maybe a circuitous manner. Um, when okay, so you mentioned writing tests can be time consuming, sounds like.
Right.
You spend a lot of your time writing tests. When you're building something,
Mm-hmm.
um, can you give me kind of a how it's made, like where, from like the conception of the idea to the feature actually being built? Can you kind of walk me through for you how that tends to go?
Well, most of the time our projects, we've only had to do one greenfield project. Most of the majority of them are brownfield. So some data is already there. So when I start with a repo, I will usually check the schema, I'll check the README, I'll check out the different models and the tests that they have. And then
Oh,
when I
sorry.
start, and
I maybe should have asked my question better.
oh,
Let's say for just one feature, one small change or something like that, kind of the
right.
process for just one change.
Oh, okay. I usually go into writing the test first.
Okay.
That's something that we practice TDD. So whatever the feature is, I will try to break it down into different pieces. If you want me to get like describe blocks, I would describe it as what it is, and then I'll have it blocks defining what each part of it will do. If that makes sense.
Yeah, I think you're already ahead of about 90% of professional developers with that process. So good work there. I mean, just by the very fact of writing tests at all, you're probably ahead of 50% of professional developers. Um, yeah, okay. So that's really interesting because your like thought process, the way that I'm picking it up at least, um, is pretty close to mine. Like I will try to get an understanding of what it is that I'm about to build, whether that means getting it from somebody else or thinking of it myself. A lot of times I'll go so far as to actually write it down, especially if it's in like an actual work situation. Definitely want to have a written specification before the work starts. And the way I think of it, and I'm curious if you think of it kind of the same way, Ian, um, is we have the specification for the feature, and
Mhm.
then we translate that specification into tests. In other words, executable specifications. That's how a lot of people think of tests. That's how I think of tests. And obviously, there's more after that. But the part that I wanted to focus on for the moment is just that process of starting with the specifications and then converting those into executable specifications, aka tests. Is that kind of how you think about it?
Could you clarify what you mean by specifications? Like which part of the process is a specification?
Yeah. Um, so a specification, maybe let's try to come up with a concrete example. I'll share my screen for a second, and I actually have
Okay,
a project I'm working on, and maybe we could come up with an idea for a change to make. Okay,
yeah.
share screen. Okay, so yeah, and this is a project I've been working on for the last few months. It's a CI server. It's made for running tests.
Okay. So I guess what we use RSpec in our boot camp. So
Uh-huh.
is this a type of testing that you're building that's kind of like RSpec or mini test? Is that what you're meaning?
If you have an RSpec test suite, this product will run your test suite for you.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so maybe your test suite takes 30 minutes to run. You don't want to sit there and let it run on your local computer. So you can push it up
Oh,
to
I
the
see.
service and it'll run it and it'll do multiple runs in parallel so that instead of sitting and waiting 30 minutes for your test suite to run, it can be done in 5 minutes in the cloud.
Oh, I see. That makes sense. Yeah, I guess we're at the part where our tests are just so quick because we have so little to work with.
Yeah. Yeah, it starts off nice that way in the beginning.
Yeah.
Okay. So there was something with this program that actually bothers me. Oh yeah, I remember it now. So on my left here is a list of all my past builds.
Hmm.
Um, and I can filter it by branch. So at the top here, there's a filter for every branch I've ever had. Let's go to this test splitting one. Okay, and that actually doesn't even work. Oh, because I didn't hit apply. Okay. Okay, so you can see instead of a whole bunch of tests, now there's only these 6. But the annoying thing is, how do I get the branch to go away? There's like no way to make it go away. There's no way to make the filter go away and have it just to go back. What I have to do to
Oh,
achieve that effect is go back to projects and click on my project, and now it kind of resets the filter if I navigate away and come back. But I don't want that, that's dumb to have to navigate away and come back. I want to be able to just clear the filter. Okay.
what
So,
you're saying, sorry for my
hmm?
understanding,
Yeah,
just to
yeah.
clarify, what you're saying is you want, after you filter it and you apply it, you want it to go back, your filter to be reset.
Well, good question. So I want to be able to apply the filter, but then I just need some convenient logical way to clear the filter.
Okay.
So one way that could work is there could be a clear button to the right of apply. I could see that making sense.
Right.
And so to answer your question, Yen, um, what I mean by a specification is, well, let's write something down. I'm going to pull up my notes. Hopefully, I don't have anything embarrassing in my notes. Um, okay. So I'm going to say um, filter, branch filter clear. I don't know. We can change that later.
Right.
Um, but I'm going to say when you select a branch, I'm going to reset this. When you select a branch and then click apply,
Oh, I see.
and actually I'm gonna do this in a little bit of a different way. I'm gonna do it as like a numbered sequence.
Okay.
Um, so first is gonna be select a branch in the branch filter, click apply. Um, observe that the list of builds has changed. Click cancel, and of course it's not cancel, clear. Click clear, but of course this clear button doesn't exist yet.
Right.
Um, the list of builds has changed back to the unfiltered version. Okay, so this is how I like to write my specifications because it's like it's a total black and white pass fail type thing.
Right.
There's there's very little room for ambiguity. And so if this assertion on step 5 passes, then we're good, and if it doesn't, then we're not good. So
Right.
let's say, Yen, that you worked at Saturn CI, that's the name of this product, say you worked at Saturn CI and I'm your boss, this is like the format that I would give you an assignment in.
Right.
Um, and so this is the specification, and then yeah, like we talked about, I would take this and then put that into a test. So
Right.
I imagine that answers your
Okay.
question, right?
Yeah, it does. We actually call these user stories
Mm-hmm.
in class, and that's why. So I understand now. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Now that we squared that away, I'm gonna unshare my screen.
Thank you.
Okay, so what were we even talking about? I don't remember.
Um, Probably a, more like focused on test writing, how to be a better test writer, how to be a better tester.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, and you'd asked the question about the nested blocks and stuff like that.
right.
Um, yeah, okay. And I said I would answer it in a circuitous way, and the circuitous answer continues. So I think of a test as an executable specification, and of I think of a test suite as a collection of specifications, and I think of a collection of specifications as being in a tree or a hierarchy.
Okay.
Yeah, and so at the near the root of the tree, I have the coarsest grained specifications, and then as you go out near the leaves, I have the finer grained specifications, and it's kind of fractal. Um, each tree has a branch, and each branch has branches coming off of it, and each branch has twigs and stuff like that. Um, and then each test is kind of a tree in itself in the way that I view it, at least. And so, what actually, maybe this is something else I can find in my test suite that's very similar to what you were referring to. I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, don't mind all this stuff. Okay, I'm going to increase my font size. All right. So I have a whole bunch of tests. Oh, not a whole bunch, but I have a certain amount of tests in my test suite. And let me think if there's perhaps one that is in sort of a tree format that we can use as an example. Hmm. It's entirely possible that there's not, but I figure it's worth checking. Okay, maybe this kind of is.
Mm,
Okay, so I'm just going to make some observations about this file, pretending that I've never seen it before.
okay.
So I see that this test is called build spec. It says describe build. So obviously it must be all about a build. And then this first describe block describes something called duration. When there are no jobs, the duration is nil. When one job is finished and the other is not finished yet, it is also nil. When there are two finished jobs, oh, this is actually poor wording. I should say all the jobs are finished. Okay, and then that's apparently it for the duration tests. And then I have a test for the start method that says it creates a new job event. Okay, anyway, the point is
Right.
we have a number of different scenarios. So this actually, I think, might be a pretty decent example.
Yeah,
So
this is great.
I have my test file. You could think of that as the root. And then each one of these describe blocks is like a branch off of that root. So we have like three branches coming off of this tree.
Hmm.
But then each one of those branches has its own branches. So on this branch called duration, we have three um Well, I guess you could call them leaves. We have 3 leaves because it's, you know, the leaf is where the branch terminates, and so here this is where the structure terminates. So we have 3 scenarios and 3 corresponding assertions. And that's how I think of tests. It's like under this scenario, we expect this. Under this other scenario, we expect this other thing, that kind of thing. Anyway,
Right.
I'll pause there in case you have any questions or comments.
Um, yeah, so I see that you're using the let here that I was curious about. And I think
Mm-hmm.
one thing that we haven't been introduced to or using because as I was telling you, we were just using describe blocks and it blocks. So it looks
Mm.
like I have your describe block and then so the context is that a way that when you phrase what's written in the quotes and when you're writing it, the description, it's
Mm-hmm.
phrased as an if kind of or like or when this happens,
I would
or like a case
characterize it
statement.
as when there is absolutely no functional difference between describe and context. They're just
Okay.
aliases of one another. It's only for the human reader that the difference exists.
Okay, I see. Yeah, okay. Because yeah, it does seem like the describe is the context is where I would put a describe. So that makes sense. Okay. And um, so I see you do have the before do within your context, but it's nested in your duration. So it's not going to affect the others, correct?
Let's see, before do oh yeah. You're talking about
Yeah,
this before here?
right. So that's
Correct.
within that tree, or is that what you're referring to? The tree or the leaf?
Yeah, I'd the way I'd put this one is that this is in this branch.
Okay. Yeah, okay. I'm following.
Okay. Yeah, and just to share the meaning of these tests in case it's not obvious, when a build runs, I mentioned the parallelism. Right now, the parallelism happens to be set to 2. And so, in order for, okay, so we have this duration here, 6 minutes,
Right.
9 seconds, 5 minutes, blah, blah, blah. Um, in order for it to make sense to have that number, all of the jobs, of course, need to be finished. And so
Right.
that's why here, whoops, I say when there are no jobs yet, there's no duration.
Right.
When not all the jobs are finished, there's no duration. And then when all the jobs are finished, it, hmm, in my wording, I'm discovering is poor again. It should say returns the um, duration of the longest job or something like that. Not
Right.
that important. Yeah, anyway, I just wanted to provide a little context regarding what those tests are all about.
Yeah, that's great. Um, so with the let, if you could scroll back up to the top,
Yeah.
I think I think the issue I was having with trying to use or get used to the let was I think I was trying to place the let in a before block and it wasn't letting me do that.
Oh, yeah, I don't think that's syntactically valid.
So I'm going to assume that you're using a factory bot to build your let.
I'm using a factory bot factory inside the let. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Let me just catch up to this.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not your information, you're just testing the duration of everything. Okay. Because we've been kind of working with FactoryBot and getting used to it and using it in our tests. But I guess maybe if you don't mind shifting a bit and going over to
Oh, yeah.
factory bot a little bit, which areas would it be, I guess, useful to use the factory bot? Because currently with where we're at in our code, um, most of our testing, since we're building CRUD applications, um, are more specific.
Okay.
So I find that we go through this process of setting up the factory bot, and it's a great process to learn how to do that. However, once we start testing, it's better to have hard-coded data, if that makes sense.
Mm, okay.
Because we've
I
been,
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah, I was just saying we've been using Faker with our factory bots, and then it's kind of like, well, you can't test that correctly when your randoms or your thing is different every time.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, the way I think of it is factory bot is useful for the data that is not essential. So, in any test, you have setup data that is meaningful and relevant to that particular test, and data that you have to have in order for things to function, but it doesn't have anything to do with the test. And
Right.
so that's where I find the utility of factory bot is for all that other stuff that has to be there, but you don't want to bring that into the picture of the test and make things confusing.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So that it's mostly been a kind of learning when to implement that factory bot and when not to.
Mm.
I noticed that in the docs for factory bot, there was a create and then there was a build. Is there a difference between the two?
Yeah, a create will persist the record and a build will not.
So that's kind of like the let, right? The difference between when you're using a let versus
Versus let
creating it.
bang.
Yeah.
Yeah. You could think of them as being kind of similar. Um, the fact that let without the bang exists is something that upsets me. Um, because it's very confusing. Um, the thing with, I mean, the whole thing is just kind of bad. Let seems to initialize a variable. Like if you look at this and then you see down here, build that duration, build
Yeah.
seems like a variable, but that's actually not what it is. It's a method. Um, Let defines a method on the fly called build, and it memoizes whatever value you give it. And the difference between let and let bang is that let bang runs whatever is in the block, what's in the inside the braces. Let bang runs
Hmm.
that immediately, whereas let without the bang waits until you call it for the first time to run it,
Oh, that's right. Okay. I
which
think,
can make it really confusing because it's like you think you're initializing things up here, but then they don't actually get initialized until sometime later. And so I've certainly
right,
seen cases where like people think things are happening in a certain order, but they're happening in a different order. It's very subtle and deceiving.
right. Okay. Um, that makes sense because it would be like if you were to, because I haven't used let and let bang at all in any of my testing. I would just create an object in a before do block.
Hmm.
And so, from my understanding, it seems to be like if I were to, the difference between a let and a let bang is if I had written my testing in my it block and I already had the information from my before do block that I've hard coded and created, and then I just created a newer object after my test assertion,
Hmm.
and that's when that object is built, right? That's when that's added to, say, my database, right? If I were creating something. That makes sense. I
I
don't know if
wish I
I'm wording
could
it
claim that I
correctly.
followed all that.
Oh, okay. I'm not very good at describing the process of my
No, I
brain.
I don't think it was your fault. I think it was mine. Maybe let's do this. Maybe let's do a couple exercises just to illustrate the differences because in addition to your understanding, maybe people watching could benefit
Right.
from that kind of illustration also. Um, so I'm going to create a new file just called thing spec. Describe thing do. Okay. We'll say let. I don't know why my syntax is looking weird. Sorry, let me try doing this differently. That looks better. Okay. Describe thing. We'll do create, sorry. Let bang value, bang value, and then we'll say let not bang value. Okay. Um, Let me see. It works. And let's see. This is hmm, maybe this is not a good illustration. Let's see. I want something that illustrates the difference. I don't think I can think of something on the fly. Let me try this.
Yeah, I
RSpec
think
let.
my thought process was more it pertained to creating items in a database. So
Um, yeah, I hope to not have to involve the database just for simplicity of the
no, yes, of
illustration.
course.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, yeah. Okay. This is great. Okay. Good job, past me. I wrote this blog post. Um, let's do this. Okay. Failure. Okay. Okay, I'm gonna run this again. Okay, so you can see the output was thinking about what my name is, Jason Sweat.
Right.
Okay, that's the first illustration. And if we do it twice, it only does the thinking part once, but it outputs the name twice.
Mm.
Um, and I assume you get it, Yen, but just to make sure, what's your understanding of why that happened?
Could you go back to your code? So you explained to me that the difference between let and let bang was that let bang is already created, right? Before you call it.
Um, Maybe more precisely, let bang calls the block you give it immediately.
Okay. Oh, it calls your block that it's given immediately. And then let doesn't do that until when it's called the first time.
Correct.
Okay. So does it only put the last line of the block?
Well, I
That seems to be what
think
it's doing.
that perhaps the difference between let and let bang is irrelevant for this one. Yeah, it gives the same
Okay.
output no matter what. I think the point of this illustration for my blog post was just to demonstrate the behavior of a memoized method.
Oh, okay.
So, are you familiar with memoization?
I am not, but when I was trying to understand the difference between let and let bang, I've heard that word pretty often. And it
Mm-hmm.
seems to be that it doesn't store that information.
let's do an example of memoization. Okay, so I'm gonna make a method called number, and it's going to return random from 0 to 100 or 99 or whatever. And I'll call that, um, oh, whoops, it's called memo. Oh, whoops, I have to actually call it. Okay, puts number. Okay, so obviously it's giving us a different number each time we call it.
Right.
But if we memoize it, I actually don't know if this is going to work. Maybe it has to be inside a class, but let's see. Yeah, okay. I think it might have to be inside a class. Okay, so let's do it over again. We'll say number equals number dot new puts number dot value. Okay, my expectation now is it'll give us a different number each time.
Mhm.
And in fact, it does. Um, okay, but then if we do this, my expectation is that it'll give us the same number each time, but I'm wrong. Oh, whoops. Okay, I just did it wrong. There. Okay, now my expectation is that it'll give us the same number each time, and it's still wrong. Okay, this is incredible. So let's figure out where I'm mistaken here. And Guillaume, feel free to jump in and help me out anytime. Same variable name and function name. No, I don't think that is the issue. Yeah, it's still misbehaving. Okay. Very strange. I am going to ask ChatGPT.
I think you're right. It's just you need to call twice put it because otherwise when you
Ah,
start
okay. I feel
when you
so
run
stupid. Yeah. These are independent runs. Okay.
yeah.
Yes. Oh, there
Wow.
we go.
Ah, somebody edit this part out. Okay. Now we get different values all 5
Right.
times.
Okay. Yes.
And now it's finally the same value all 5 times.
Right. Okay.
Okay. So, Yen, can you explain this one for us?
Um, Before, when a value was not assigned, when it wasn't assigned to a variable, it was just calling it randomly every time. But once you assigned it to the variable, it's going to call what the variable is.
Yeah,
I don't
you're
know.
familiar with this operator here?
I have seen it in my readings. However, I've never used it and I'm not quite sure what it does.
Yeah, I think it's called the lazy assignment operator. Let me just make sure I'm right about that. Now my keyboard's not working. Um, sometimes just everything goes wrong. Yeah, I can't type. Interesting. All right. Let me try opening up another one in Ruby. Okay. In Ruby, what is that operator? Let's see if I had the name right. Okay. Yes. Is it also called lazy assignment? Okay. Okay, so according to ChatGPT, I was right about that. Yeah, so
Oh, I see.
it's equivalent to doing this. It's like you could say 5 5 equals nil or 5. And of course, since the outcome of nil or 5 is 5,
Hmm.
um, the variable 5 gets assigned to 5. But we could also just do the same thing. 6. Um, well, okay. I'm full of bad examples today. Okay, let's see. Let me try to think of something more realistic. Yam, can you help me out? I shouldn't have taken all those stupid pills earlier today. It's really
So
affecting my performance.
if we go back, Jason, so you're saying is the lazy assignment operator is what's letting you call the same random number every time?
Yeah, so it's like on the first call, it says, oh, you know what? Let's do this. This will be a good example. Value equals value or random 0 to 100. So I'm expecting we'll get the same behavior, and we do.
Mm,
So maybe Yen, you can kind of piece
I
together
see.
how this
Okay.
works. On the first,
Yeah.
yeah, actually, can you walk us through it? So let's pretend it's the first time number.value is getting called. Can you walk us through like how line 3 there would get executed, like
Yeah.
replacing each value with what it really is?
Yeah. So on line 3, the first time you run that code on line 8, it's going to go to your method in line 2. It's going to execute line 3.
Mm-hmm.
The variable value is going to be empty because you haven't called that method before.
Yeah.
So because it's empty, it's going to go over and it's going to pick a random number and it's going
Yeah.
to output that in your terminal. And then that's why it's not different the other time.
Yeah. So we can actually do this. So like in my IRB console here, if I do
Hmm.
value, it's nil because we've never done anything with this before. Um, if I do value or rand 0, 100, it gives me a random number.
Hmm.
Um, so then on that first time, value is nil, and value is still nil because I haven't actually assigned it to something. But if I
Right.
do value equals value or rand blah blah blah, whoops,
You need
I
to.
did that totally wrong. Value equals value or rand. There we go. That evaluates to that random number is nil or the random number evaluates to the random number. So now value is 78. But if I do value equals value or rand 0, 100, it's still 78 because the outcome of 78 or some other number is 78 because it just goes by whatever it sees first.
Right.
Okay, so that covers how that part goes, but doing something equals itself or something else is so common that in Ruby we just have this lazy assignment, which does the same thing.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So that is memoization. When you make it so that a method returns the value fresh the first time, but then every subsequent time it just uses a stored value, that's memoization.
Okay.
Yeah. And so here, when we do let my name, we're creating a memoized method called my name.
Right.
And I want to do an experiment here. If I had not done a class would it still behave the same? Oops. Yeah, it still behaves the same. Okay. Okay. So we can do this. We can kind of replicate the same value. So instead of let my name, we can do def my name. I just realized this is going to get kind of complicated quick, but that's okay. How do we memoize this behavior? Maybe that's not so easy, but maybe we should do it anyway. Okay. Def create memoized method. Okay. And I'll make this take a block. Yen, maybe you've encountered blocks in Ruby?
No.
Okay. Well, we're going to take a fairly serious detour then.
Okay.
Okay. So I'm going to make this method called create memoized method. Takes a block. Block.call. All right. We'll come back and talk about what this means. So then I'll call create memoized method and I'll give it the behavior hello. Okay. So let's see if I manage to do this without any mistakes. Given how today has been going so far, the answer is probably no, but we'll see. Okay. Congratulations to me. I did the right thing. Okay. So Yen, you're obviously familiar with the fact that you can pass values to a method when you call it. But in Ruby,
Right.
you can pass not only values to a method when you call it, you can pass behavior. So here, okay, let's do a different example. We'll say we'll say square. Number, no, sorry. We'll say operate. Number operation. No, sorry. Number and block. Okay. Block.call. Okay, so now I can say operate and pass a 5 and then say sorry, bear with me a second. I'm going to pass it a block. Okay, let's see if I managed to do this with no mistakes. No, I didn't, because I need to do puts. Okay. Okay, so that's what I expect. And before I explain this, let me do another type of thing so that I can make sure I did it right. Okay. Okay. And sorry, let me think for just a moment. I want to make sure this is clear. And I think there's a clearer way I can do it. Okay. Yeah, I think this example is a bit clearer than what I had a second ago. So you can see, Yen, that I have an operate method that I'm defining right at the beginning there. It takes a block, and I'm calling the block I'm given with the number 5. I'm passing the number 5 to the block as an argument. And
Right.
when I call the operate method, I'm not passing a value to operate, I'm passing behavior. And so
Right.
in that first one, I'm passing the behavior of multiplication, and the second one, I'm passing addition. And you can see, of course, when we run it, we get 25 and 10.
Why would you, or in what instances would you call a behavior versus another method?
Good question. I'll give you another illustration. Um, all right, I might have to fumble my way around a bit before we arrive at something useful, but let me do this. So first of all, this will take a block.call, and I want to say tag p do puts hello. Okay. What's the word for this? I don't know. I'm gonna just call it identifier. Okay, so I'm gonna run what I just wrote to see if it even runs, and it does. Okay. So I'm gonna do puts p and then puts p closing tag. Okay. So we wrote this thing where you can like, oh, I don't know, div. I'm in a div. Me too. Run that. Okay. And sorry, I'm just gonna give it a little spacing to make it easier to read.
Mm.
Okay. And to make it even more clear, we can say, I'll just put something in there. I just wanted to put something in there that's not like static text.
Um, your tag is, it's supposed to be in a div, it's still in a P.
Pardon me.
On the right-hand side of your terminal. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
There we go. Okay. Yeah, I was like, how is that working with a hard-coded P?
Just an error on my part
Got
in
it. Okay.
continuing with today's tradition. Okay. So, conceivably, we could have created a function where we just pass it a hard-coded string.
Right.
But here we can specify the tag we want, and then we can do stuff while we're inside of the tag.
Yeah, I see. So if you're writing this, I guess because we've mostly just been working with having to have classes,
Mm-hmm.
where does this go?
Oh, good question. I don't know. Highly situation dependent, but I
Okay.
could see this going in some kind of model file or something like that.
So you can write behaviors outside of a method inside a class.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and in fact, you can do things like this. Um, let's see. How do I want to do it? I don't know if I have this right. Okay.
Okay.
So you can actually assign a behavior to a variable.
Right. See. Very cool.
Yeah, so this concept of a block is very central to quite a bit of Ruby programming. And in fact, in my testing book, I dedicate a number of chapters just to these Ruby fundamentals because there's so much of this block business happening in RSpec that I find it really helps to have a grasp on those Ruby fundamentals. And then when you go
Mhm.
and study that stuff and you come back and look at the RSpec tests, it just makes so much more sense.
So then is a behavior and a block interchangeable? Are the interchangeable words, or what's the difference between a behavior and a block? Because it looked like that behavior was a block, if that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. So in the language of the industry or whatever, people don't use the words block and behavior interchangeably, but it is the case that a block contains a behavior. A block, I would think of a block as like an encapsulated piece of behavior that you can like pass around and do stuff with.
Okay. So then I feel like with this, you would have to be very, is there a way to isolate your behaviors?
What do you mean?
Well, if you have multiple, or I guess you would just have to make sure, I mean, say you have another method that takes in a different block and wants to change it somehow.
Okay.
Is it going to take, it's going to take in all the other behaviors in that file, right? When you call block.call.
Depends on how you design it. If I'm being honest, I think I don't 100%
Understand
understand the
what I'm saying?
question.
Okay. Um,
Well, I'll also say something else. After, I don't know, 8 or 10 years of Ruby programming, I finally dug into this block stuff and I spent many days of intense research before I understood this stuff.
right.
So I just say that um, in case like you or somebody watching this, if they're like, oh, I don't get it. It's like, well, we've been talking about this for like 10 minutes. I
Right.
spent like several days of intense research on it. So don't feel bad if it's not immediately clear. Um, I do have a video. So if you like search YouTube later for understanding Ruby blocks,
Hmm.
I have like 7 or so videos that discuss this topic.
Okay. Yeah,
Yeah.
now I'm pretty intrigued, and I'm going to assume that I don't understand enough to ask the question that I'm having, and
Mm.
probably the more, well, once I watch those videos, I'll probably understand better.
Do you want to take a swing at it anyway?
Um, I think currently the way that I'm seeing this is that these behaviors that you've written are kind of like different parameters that you can pass through for your method. And so what happens if there's a block that I don't want to pass through, or you just wouldn't have those?
Oh, I think you just wouldn't have it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think this stuff might be okay. So right now, all this stuff is fairly like theoretical and detached from reality. I
Mhm.
think once you start to see practical applications of blocks, it'll become clearer for you. And actually, I can show you a thing
Right.
or two right now. So let's go to my application and let's go to, I don't know, builds controller. Not seeing a good example there. What is like a CRUD? operation. Projects controller. Okay, yeah. So you've probably seen this kind of thing in Rails, right, Yen?
Right, yes.
Yeah, so respond to, this was so cryptic to me for like the first, I don't know how many years of using Rails, but respond to is a method and it takes a block.
Mm-hmm.
And then inside of that, format is an object, and format has these two methods, HTML and JSON. And each of those methods, HTML and JSON, take a block. So this is a block, this is a block, this is a
Right.
block, and this is a block.
Mm-hmm.
So we're passing behavior, we're saying in the case of HTML, execute this behavior. In the case of JSON, execute this behavior.
All right,
It,
okay.
yeah, it wouldn't cut it just to pass a value because it doesn't know what to do with the value. So we're not
Right.
telling it like, do your thing, do your normal thing using this value because it doesn't know what the normal thing is. It has to
Mm-hmm.
ask us like, what do you want to do? And then we tell it the entire thing. Like, not only are these the values, but this is the actual thing that should be done in this scenario.
Right. Okay, I think I'll need to let that sink in a bit more.
Mm-hmm.
But thanks for that introduction to blocks.
Yeah.
I mean, I've known about blocks where, like you have your block there and the curly braces denotes that that's a block inside of there, but I'd never I guess seen the block and the call and the behavior.
Yeah, once I finally learned about all this stuff, again, several years into my Ruby career, once I learned that stuff and went back and looked at Ruby code again, it was like I had some, I don't know, special glasses on or something. Everything just looked completely different to me.
Oh, is that Ruby specific? The blocks and the um
Yeah, other languages have similar constructs,
okay,
but this is, well, I'm guessing Ruby has its own peculiar way of doing it. I'm not familiar enough with all the other languages to know that there's no other language that does it the same way.
right.
Because there is the idea here. I'll tell you what's not unique to Ruby. Maybe that's how I can answer that question. The idea of having a piece of behavior and being able to
Mm-hmm.
pass that behavior and call it and all that stuff, that's not unique to Ruby. But I think maybe the specific way that Ruby does it is what's unique to Ruby.
Okay. That makes sense. Um Getting a lot more into the question that I was kind of formulating before is, would you have multiple methods that call a block? You can have multiple methods that call a block.
Yeah.
Okay. And going back to the let and let bang, you were showing there was a reason. What was the reason that it was not printing out the first line? It just printed out the last line twice.
Because the behavior was memoized. So let takes a block. We're giving let a piece of behavior. And let is executing that behavior exactly once and never again. And then it takes the outcome of that, and that's what it uses forevermore.
Oh, I see. Okay. Was there a link to that post that you made about where you pulled that?
Yeah, I can share it with you.
Okay, I think I'm starting to understand that now. But I'd like to I'm a better visual learner.
Yeah, if somebody's watching this on YouTube, you can just Google the difference between let and let in RSpec, and it should come up, codewithjason.com. Okay. We're actually a little over time, but that's fine.
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's totally fine. A couple things I want to say for the sake of the video before we drop off here. One is that, dear viewer, if you're interested in having some calls like this with me, I offer a free mentorship program. You can go to codewithjason.com and it's pretty easy to find the link to it. You can apply. I'll also say that I do this sort of thing for work. So if you or somebody on your team who works for you, if you'd like me to do this sort of thing where you work, I'm available for hire to do this sort of thing. Usually it's something more like writing tests together and stuff like that, but it doesn't have to be limited to that. Um, Again, you can go to codewithjason.com and it's pretty easy to figure out how to contact me from there. Let's see if there's anything else before we drop off. No, I think that was about it. Yen, thanks so much for joining me today. You have my scheduling link, so if you'd like to do
Yep,
more of these, you're very welcome to come back and do more. So just grab whatever time works for you.
definitely. Thank you so much, Jason. I really appreciate it. And I'll come better prepared next time. I've just been in the middle of working on a project and crunching on time. So
Oh no, this was perfect. And would you understand me if I said "Wa hen gao xing ren shuni"?
uh no, not at all.
It's very nice to meet you.
Okay. Nice to meet you too. I'm trying to it's been so long since I've spoken my dialect. English is my second language,
Okay.
but being out here in Arizona and away from my family, I don't really speak. We call it mien very
Mhm.
often. So I'm trying to think of what to say back. Uh, I'll just say Langsing,
Yeah.
which is
All right.
thank you.
There we go. Um, okay. Well, thanks everybody. Thank you, dear viewer. See you next time.